Thank you for joining us for the Carbon 613 speaker series with Cara Clairman, CEO of Plug and Drive. I'm Jen, Manager of Community Programs here at Enviro Center. For those of you who don't know us, Enviro Center is a nonprofit environmental organization based here in Ottawa. Our core mission supports sustainable lifestyles, which means that we encourage people to take action on climate change in their own lives, in their homes, their workplaces and businesses, their communities, and right here in our city. Our work focuses on 4 key areas: green homes, green transportation, green business, and green lifestyle. Today, we're here to talk about green transportation in Ottawa, and specifically zero emissions, low carbon transportation. But before we get started, we have just a few logistical notes. Please note that the session is going to be recorded and shared online after the event. We ask that you keep yourself muted during the presentation so that everyone is able to hear Cara speaking. And we're going to be monitoring questions in the chat box. So we encourage you to type them there and we'll bring them forward to Cara for a Q&A period following the presentation. So let's get started. Our speaker today is Cara Clairman. Cara is President and CEO of Plug and Drive, which promotes electric vehicles to maximize their environmental and economic benefits. Cara has taken Plug and Drive from an idea to a thriving nonprofit recognized as a leader in the EV space. In 2018, Plug and Drive's Electric Vehicle Discovery Center was selected as Canada's 2019 top project by Clean 50 community. Cara has more than 20 years of experience working in the environmental and sustainability fields, including 12 years working at Ontario Power Generation, initially as an environmental lawyer and later in the role of Vice President of Sustainable Development. Cara is the 2017 recipient of the Women in Renewable Energy's Woman of the Year Award, and she currently drives a 100% electric Tesla Model 3. So once again, welcome to everyone in our audience, and Cara, you have the digital floor.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm just going to share my screen now.
Great.
Okay, so just let me know. You see what you should see there? My first slide. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here virtually in Ottawa. I'm actually here in Toronto, but I'm glad that I'm able to do this. There's one of the pluses of COVID. We've learned how to attend sessions virtually and get together without physically getting together. It doesn't quite always do the job, but it's not a bad substitute. I'm going to talk to you about electric cars. I'm going to cover, the business case for them and some specifics around what Plug and Drive is doing, what some others are doing, some trends, and hopefully get you excited that if you haven't decided it's for you yet, you will after this, and hopefully answer any questions that you have. More than happy to take questions at any time if they can be flagged to me during or at the end. We have some time for Q&A, I know. So you folks have probably heard about electric cars, and many of you might have joined this talk thinking, you're on the fence or you're thinking about it. I like to make sure we're all on the same page about why EVs make sense, particularly here in Ontario, but actually in every jurisdiction pretty much in the world. The reason that EVs have sort of risen to prominence over the last number of years is really the greenhouse gas emission reduction benefit. If you think about where the greenhouse gas emissions come from in our society, this slide sort of shows you the big 3, transportation, industry, and buildings. And transportation here in Ontario is actually the largest emitting sector. And so, in fact, it's number 1 or number 2, or tied for number 2 in every province of Canada. And so you really can't tackle your climate change goals or reach any targets if you don't look at transportation. So that's sort of the number 1 reason why we're thinking about electric cars, because of course we have this opportunity to take a bite out of this giant chunk of emissions that are transportation. And the reason that it makes sense is because actually our electricity grid has very low emissions, and this is Ontario's grid more or less, mostly nuclear, hydro, some renewables and some natural gas. And that natural gas tends to run only at the peak time when there's very high demand, like on the hottest days and on the coldest days, generally usually in the middle of the day. And so for the most part at nighttime, when you might be home and you know, it's convenient for you to plug in your car, that's actually when the grid is typically at its lowest emitting point. And so it's actually a perfect match with the Ontario grid for that reason. And also for the reason that in Ontario, we have what's called surplus baseload generation, which means we've got extra electricity on the grid at night that we can't use. That's because nuclear plants tend to run 24/7, and a lot of our hydro plants are what we call run of the river, meaning they flow and there's no way to stop them. We don't pond up our water the way a lot of other jurisdictions do. We don't have giant reservoirs. And so more or less these two largest chunks of electricity we have run 24/7, which means at night when everyone's turning everything off, we have all this extra electricity that more or less we dump into New York State and into Quebec at a loss every night. And so wouldn't it make sense if we could get people to plug their cars in at night? Not only are we going to have a huge emission reduction, but we're also doing our province an economic favor because they can stop losing money on that electricity every night. So we have sort of both environmental and economic reasons that EVs make so much sense here. And one of the things that, so I've covered off the environmental, you can reduce your emissions actually here in Ontario by more than 90%. But most people seem to not know that they're also going to save a whole pile of money driving an electric car. Typically, electricity is around 1/4 to 1/3 the price of gas, even at $1 gas. You know, electricity runs around, you know, 25 to 30 cents equivalent a liter. So if you're paying $1 or $1.10, I'm paying less than 30 cents equivalent. So I'm going to save a whole bunch of money on my fuel, and then I'm also going to save money on maintenance because electric cars just don't have very many moving parts. On average, they have something like 20 to 30 moving parts compared to a gas car that has as many as 2,000. And so you can just imagine when there's 2,000 moving parts, there's just a whole lot more things to break. And so typically they require a lot more maintenance than EVs. I like to tell the anecdote around my very first EV, which was a Nissan Leaf in 2011. I got that car, and I drove that car up until about a year and a half ago. In the first 6 years of ownership, I changed my wiper blades. So it cost me $20 in maintenance. There was never anything to fix in that car. And that was a first generation car. So I just use that to say, you know, I challenge you to find a car that is as affordable to drive. The other important things that I like to convey is, you know, a lot of people have in their minds that, well, I'm interested, but, you know, I'm waiting for this particular brand or that particular brand. We're up to 40, you know, different makes and models of EV available in Canada now. And by about this time, in a year and a half to 2 years from now, we're going to have over 100 makes and models available. And so that issue of like, oh, I want this style or I want this brand, that's going away as an issue. And the final sort of barrier that seems to affect people is this issue about charging, and is it going to be difficult, and I'm worried about the range. And the reality is most Canadians actually only drive 30 to 50 kilometers a day. And of course, so an EV is a breeze with that type of range. Now, of course, there are people who, of course, drive more. Now, a lot of the batteries, of course, have better range than they did 10 years ago when the first EVs came out. We've got a lot of vehicles on the market now that get 400, 500 kilometers of range. So that also starts to go away as an issue. And of course, what we're seeing is most Canadians are only charging their EV one time per week. So this idea that it's going to be a hassle, that I'm always going to have to find chargers everywhere is sort of a more imagined than real. Just 2 minutes on plug and drive. This is the front of our EV Discovery Center. And we opened this center in 2017. Imagine Science Center meets car showroom. It's a really cool place to come and just learn about EVs with no pressure to buy anything. If you're in the GTA for some reason, please do come and visit us. We are open for appointments only right now as a way of COVID-friendly way of still having the center open and very safe, and you'll be alone in the center, so it's possible still to come. And the idea here is we really want people to have a chance to test drive cars, because we know that that helps people get over their concerns. Most people will not buy a car without doing a test drive, and unfortunately a lot of dealers still don't have them, so we need to help. And finally, just to let you know, we of course mostly focus on outreach. We've worked with Enviro Center for a number of years, bringing on outreach events to the Ottawa area, typically sort of a couple of days in different locations around Ottawa to give people that test drive experience. But of course, we also work on policy, and we do research, and we partner with many other organizations, including Enviro Center. So if you happen to be from another town and you want to have Plug and Drive out to your city or town, please do reach out to me. Just to give you an idea, this is the center, and like I said, I hope you'll come if you get the chance. Super fun place to visit. And if you're ever thinking of hosting a conference, back when we're allowed to have conferences, it's got a great venue for that. So look it up when you have the chance. Like Enviro Center, we are not for profit, and we can't do what we do without our sponsors. And so I'd just like to take a moment to thank them very much for all their support. You can see most of our sponsors are in the electrical utility space or auto, as well as the folks who make chargers. Makes lots of sense. Those are the people that want to work with us. And of course, we love to work with anyone who is keen to help move electrification forward. Okay. We did a survey in the GTA. It's a couple of years old now, but still very relevant, asking, trying to figure out EV buying behavior. And we asked about 200 EV owners why they chose an EV. And then we asked about 1,000 gas car owners why they did not. And it was really quite fascinating, because the EV owners, by and large, the most popular answer was that they chose the EV for the environmental benefit. Now, this is an early adopter crowd, so perhaps, that's the reason for that. But then, excuse me, when we asked the gas car owners why they did not, their number one answer was EVs are too expensive. And this surprised us, actually, because we were sort of expecting the number one answer to be range. The range isn't enough, or, it can't meet my life, or whatever. Or style of car, I want an SUV and they don't have one. And the next most popular answer was range, but it was down around 13%. So really, too expensive was really a dominant theme. And this got us thinking, how can we help address this issue of cost and make EVs more available and more affordable to more people? Now, the federal government, as you probably know, has put a rebate on EVs, about $5,000, and there are some criteria. The vehicle, I think, has to be $45,000 or less, and there's a few other restrictions. But for a lot of people, that's still a very expensive vehicle. And so we actually came up with a few different ways to deal with it. But the number one thing that we did is we worked towards helping people get into a used EV. And this is a program that's still ongoing. It's available across Ontario, so of course, available to anyone in Ottawa. We realized that used EVs actually are extremely affordable and available. And they make it possible for people to get into an EV who really thought maybe they couldn't afford one. And so if you are interested and you've been thinking about an EV, but you hadn't really thought about used, there's actually a lot available. And because we're here in 2020, I mean, there's 2017s and 2018s coming off lease. So these aren't necessarily really old cars. There's everything from 2011s all the way up. So check out Kijiji or Auto Trader. There's lots of availability. And Plug and Drive, if you meet very few criteria, will give you a rebate of $1,000 when you buy a used EV. There are a few steps to go through to be able to get the rebate. So before you buy the vehicle, do check it out on our website. You'll see the web address there. But quite easy to make available to you, and now all virtual because, of course, of COVID. So a great opportunity there. On top of that, we've actually in the last few months added a second rebate to the program. Thanks very much to our funder, the MH Brigham Foundation. This is actually a personal family foundation that is funding this rebate program. So no government money, it's all privately funded, which I think is quite unique. On the second part of the funding, if you both scrap an old gas car and buy a used EV, you get a second $1,000. So $2,000 for both scrapping a gas car and buying a used EV. Again, all the details available on our website. Really great program. So far, we have delivered more than 500 rebates on the used EV and about 50 scrap. So we're pretty thrilled with the results. It's been really, really popular. We probably have enough money in our funding to go about another 10 months to a year. But of course, that really depends on the uptake and how popular. So if you're thinking about it, don't wait. Get on it because it is first come, first serve. And then if you are making the move and then you need a home charger, now not everyone needs a home charger, and in the Q&A we can get into why that might be. But if you do tend to drive further and you have a 100% battery electric car, you might want a home charger, which is sort of equivalent to a dryer plug, a little bit faster. We do have a dedicated website with an online store that has all the different brands of chargers, and you can compare them. And there's also a phone number you can call and get help if you aren't sure which one to buy. If you do it through our store, you're actually helping us with our educational programming, so we really appreciate that. And we'll also give you the help you need. Unfortunately, Amazon and Home Depot, although they each, I think, have one charger on their sort of online store, there's nobody who can answer any questions you might have. Okay, I did want to talk about a couple of other items that might be more applicable to those of you that are thinking about EV in a business setting. Two things in particular. First, this guide, Lead the Charge, is a really comprehensive guide to help you if you're thinking about putting chargers in at your workplace. I won't get into all the details, but there's a lot of real pluses to putting charging stations at your workplace. You might be thinking about fleet, but you might also want it for your employees. There's a whole bunch of reasons, and there's a lot of common steps that everyone has to go through, and we realize there's no reason for people to reinvent the wheel in how to get this done, how to figure out, well, what's the demand? How many should I put in? What kind should I put in? What do I have to think about when I'm doing these installations, etc. So we sort of go through all the big questions that you might want to ask, and instead of you having to put an employee on this and waste a whole bunch of time figuring this out, if you're interested, you know, you can email us or email me. My contact information will be at the end of this presentation. We're happy to assist you with your workplace charging. I was asked by Enviro Center also just to spend a couple of minutes on fleet. We're covering a lot of ground here, but certainly give you a taste of each sort of area of EV, and happy to follow up with people if they need more information. But I think some of you are in businesses where you're thinking about EVs in your fleet and maybe aren't really sure where to get started. Plug and Drive certainly can help you. But I wanted to show you the benefits of thinking about fleet. There have been lots of different studies done showing the economic benefits of switching some of your vehicles to EV in your fleet. But this study I found very compelling. It's a relatively recent study of municipalities that was done by the Atmospheric Fund. A bunch of Ontario municipalities took part in the study. as you can see, and the results were really quite staggering. And I would say, you know, this gives you some of the stats, but the key takeaway is by switching to EVs in their fleet, on average, they saved 2/3. So like the EV was 1/3 the cost and actually dropped the GHG emissions to 1/10. So huge benefits from both an environmental and of course a cost perspective. Really quite impressive numbers. And this was just based on the vehicles that these folks chose. I'm just taking a look at the chat box, but I think we will do the questions at the end. So I'm gonna wait on that. Okay. So that gives you an idea of the fleet benefits, and a number of municipalities across Ontario are looking at strategically including electrics in their fleets, and not just their vehicle fleets, but also their buses and light duty and heavy duty, everything in between. This is just one I chose that happens to be nearby. It's Kingston. They put a big focus on electric buses, for example, and interesting in Kingston, they also electrified their ferry to Wolf Island, which is pretty cool. It's one of the first electric ferries in Canada. So lots of opportunity to both reduce emissions and, by the way, save money too. Okay, a very exciting announcement for Ottawa. We have launched something we're calling the Mobile EV Education Trailer, or MEET. The idea of this is a hybrid model between doing our roadshow events, which we've had numerous times, as I mentioned, in Ottawa, and our EV Discovery Center, which is a full-on bricks and mortar facility. This is a trailer that pops open into a really cool interactive space, so you get like a mini Discovery Center on wheels. And our very first city that we are opening this in is Ottawa. The MEET has landed and it is in the parking lot of the IKEA as we speak. It opens for business on October the 2nd, so we're excited to open it during Drive Electric Week. And that's on Friday, tomorrow, October the 2nd. It is appointment only because of COVID. So I urge you to go to the Plug and Drive website and make an appointment for your individual visit. That way it will be very COVID safe. There won't be lots of people around and you'll be outside as well. Our plan is to be in Ottawa for 2 to 3 months, and then we hope to take the MEET on tour. We will go across Canada to visit different cities, and the great thing about this is it gives cities, maybe some of the smaller cities especially, that wouldn't necessarily even get a road show or wouldn't get the opportunity to test drive these cars because they don't happen to have dealerships that are carrying them. We can really bring the EV Discovery Center to them. Again, so pleased to be able to thank the sponsors that are helping make this possible, including Enercan, OPG, Hydro One, the Power Workers Union, and a variety of automakers that have helped us make this possible. As I mentioned, this was actually from our ride and drive event that we did with Enviro Center just last year at the same location. But there's just not enough opportunities to test drive, and you know, a full bricks and mortar place isn't possible in many cities. So of course, this makes tons of sense. And we've got some great data that shows the experience of doing the test drive and doing the learning really does get people to make the choice to go electric. And so we're excited to be there in Ottawa. As I said, go online and make an appointment. Okay, I want to finish up with just a few minutes on human health. We spend a lot of time in the EV world talking about the environmental benefit in terms of GHG reductions and the economic benefit, which is you're going to save money and that's good for the province's economy and all that. But one thing that we don't talk about very much is the health benefit. And I think, in fact, COVID has kind of highlighted this, because we all noticed when, you know, everything shut down, one of the things, those of us living in bigger cities, we all noticed, wow, like the air quality has really improved. So we knew intuitively that, wow, like driving is really having an impact on the air quality and therefore probably on our health. Well, the Ontario Public Health Association with Environmental Defence did a very detailed study. It's available at cleartheair.ca. And what they found was that they modeled out what would happen if we electrified, 100% of the vehicle fleet, light duty of like all the citizens' cars, or 50%, and they showed the benefits. And the social benefits were humongous. 2.4 billion in total social benefits, huge amount of GHG reductions, premature deaths avoided, hospital visits reduced, and just showed how many health problems are actually caused by all our cars. And so I really encourage you to take a look at that if you're interested. And we can all benefit if we all make this choice. So it's not just good for the environment, it's not just good for your wallet, but it's also good for your health. So that was it for my formal presentation. I'm more than happy to take your questions, and there's my contact information if you want to reach out to me. This is me in my first EV, my Nissan Leaf, which I absolutely loved. And thanks again, Jen, and I'm ready for questions.
That was great. Thanks so much. It's always interesting, we've had a few of these speakers every day at 2 o'clock, and every one I'm learning a little more than the last one. I really like that you included the human health aspect because, I ride a bike a lot, and sometimes people ask me about, you're biking downtown and all that pollution, and they've actually done studies that the pollution inside of vehicles can be worse than the roads as well in a typical vehicle. So it's fun to throw that out there as another wild kind of stat. Mandy is monitoring our chat box, and so she's going to go ahead and read out any questions we might have. And let's see what folks have to say.
Great. So the first question we got was, as a hybrid owner, I'm more interested in a plug-in hybrid 100% EV in order to have a backup option if there's a power outage or fuel supply disruption. But the first generation of PHEVs aren't optimized for true interoperability to switch between electricity and gasoline. Are you aware of or expecting any second generation PHEVs that would allow to fully interchange between fuels? Thanks.
So I guess when you mean interoperability, it's like to choose whether you're going to run electricity or gas. Most of them, you just ran it on electricity first, and then it switched to gas automatically. I assume that's what they're talking about. Actually, the Mitsubishi Outlander has that feature where you can choose it. I think what most people do, frankly, is they sort of do their urban suburban commuting on electric, and then they use the gas for the road trip. So I guess the sort of electricity first and gas after tends to work for most people. So that's why that added feature isn't in most vehicles. Like I said, I know it's in the Outlander. I have not seen it in a lot of other vehicles. I think the Volvos have it as well. So it tends to be in the higher end vehicles. And the battery actually opportunity is getting bigger in some of those plug-in hybrids. Like now you can get up to sort of 70, 80 kilometers on the battery and then switch to gas. So they are improving. I'm actually a fan of those vehicles. I mean, I drive a full electric, but for folks who aren't quite ready, or let's say they're a single car family, I can understand it. And I'm glad that option is there. In the EV community, we like to joke that it's like the gateway drug. It's like, oh, we're going to get them onto the EV with the plug-in hybrid, and then the next car will be fully electric. So if that's what you need to make the switch, do it.
Yeah, and I think even when power is out, the gas station power is out, and the pump.
That's right. Working. That is out.
Keep that in mind. I wouldn't.
Same problem.
Same problem.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, if you're looking at plug-in hybrids, they count in our used EV rebate program. So. Good. Check that out.
Great. Do you have another question, Mandy?
Wonderful. I do. I sometimes hear in discussions an argument that once an EV battery reaches the end of its life, it is very expensive to replace and generates a high environmental cost. Can you comment whether this is still a concern nowadays?
It is not. So yes, that has been a common discussion point, but the reality was the cars were so new there really weren't any batteries coming out of the cars, and we didn't actually know. So I think it was more what people thought might happen, because of course at that time we didn't know what was going to happen to the batteries. Now, what we have found is there are a number of players doing research showing that about 80 to 90% of the battery can be reused and recycled. A number of the players that are into battery recycling from phones and computers, because those are also lithium ion batteries, already know how to do it. And so it's just like a larger version of that. And so they're working on it. The other thing that's happening is typically when the battery is no good for the car anymore, let's say it's at like 75, 80%, and so your range is reduced a bit. And so typically that's when it might not be good for the car anymore, but it still has quite a lot of juice left in it. And so what's happening is those batteries are being snapped together as sort of secondary or backup storage. And so they actually are going to be sold into a secondary market, and you'll probably be able to sell your battery for a couple of $1,000 into this secondary market, or you'll kind of, that'll be part of your used vehicle, you know, price that you'll get, and it'll get reused in storage, and then it will get recycled. The third piece of good news is there was a very recent study done by Fleet Karma that showed the batteries are actually lasting way longer than anybody thought that they would. And in fact, they're outlasting the cars. So this issue that, oh, it's going to happen like in the time that you own the car is probably not going to happen. And that's why a lot of the automakers give such a long warranty on the battery. They're giving 8 years, some are even giving 10 years, because they actually aren't crapping out the way people, well, they just weren't sure.
Yeah, there's so much myth out there, I find, really based on like the older technology. You know, we really have a lot of news that came out maybe 10 years ago, and so much has changed in that time. And the first time people heard about EVs, they kind of learned about the battery situation and those expensive resources and the range issues where cars were going like 35 kilometers or whatever. And the world has really just opened up and expanded so much. So that's that was a really great question to answer, actually. Mandy, do you have any other questions? Otherwise,
no other questions in the chat box right now.
Oh, okay. So I'm always full of questions, as you know. So I just always ask questions. I would really like to talk a little bit more about your meet here in Ottawa, because that's really exciting news for us.
It is.
I know. I actually don't have an EV, full disclosure, even though I sort of, you know, really am involved in these programs, but I don't drive very much.
It's time.
I know. I have a lot of bicycles though, so it's all good.
Well, no car is actually the best you can do,
well,
but
I do
for those of us
who
aren't going to have a car, this is the one.
Yeah. So, but one of the things that I find is, and what really got us thinking about doing our roadshow type EV days initially was, it can be really intimidating to walk into a particular dealership and get that kind of come at you sales pitch where you really just want some information. And I think that's what's really exciting, is that you guys aren't trying to sell us anything except information.
That's the ideas.
Yeah.
No, exactly. Well, that's one of the things that we get, like with their testimonials, is that they came, they spent 2-3 hours, they tried every car we had, you know, and they really figured out what would suit their life, and there was no pressure to buy anything. And certainly, you know, we've learned that people don't love the dealership experience. And on top of it, right now, many dealers don't even have an EV. And if they have it, they might just have one, and it might not be the one, you know. So if, rather than having to go to all different brand dealerships, you can make a one-stop shop just with all the different brands there. Even at the Ottawa location, you're going to have 4 or 5 choices from, and both plug-in hybrid and full electric. So you'll really have sort of the range of choices, and then you can make an informed decision. And certainly initially some of the dealerships were a bit concerned about us because they thought, oh, what are they doing? They're going to take sales away from us. But now actually they realize we're their friend, because we just push people to go on and buy it, and then they go to the dealer and buy it. We're not selling cars.
Yeah. And that's really cool. So that's great. So I do hope everyone takes advantage of going and checking that out. I think once word gets on the street, I know last year when we did our test drives, we had more people wanting to do them than we could
That's
do.
right.
Like
Well,
we
that's
did
what
90
made us think,
test drives.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what made us think Ottawa was so important, because it is quite a large city, and at the same time, we would come maybe 2-3 days a year, but that doesn't give people the full opportunity, you know, and a center is, you know, sort of a 5-year commitment full time, and that's actually hard to make viable. It's very expensive. So this is like a perfect compromise, which is like 2-3 months. People can try it. We're going to start open Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Because those are our most popular days, and then see how it goes. If it's really super popular, we'll open for another day, and we'll take it from there. But certainly it's a great chance to learn all about EVs in a no pressure environment.
Yeah. And even, I know we were talking a little bit about the fleet stuff as well. And would your staff at the meet be well versed to talk about fleet vehicle, or would they contact Plug and Drive, the mothership in Toronto, for that kind of information?
You probably contact us at Plug and Drive. There are some people though who do know a lot about EVs and could help you figure out a little bit of that, and actually even used for fleet, if you can believe it. There's lots of folks looking at that. But we actually have some solutions that we're working with partners who can really do the proper fleet assessment and help you, but a very affordable solution, like to do a fleet assessment, to sort of figure out this. The worst thing you want to do is stick a vehicle into a fleet in a application where it's not suited and give people a bad experience, you know. So if a particular, you know, you have to look at, in a fleet, well, how far does that car go on a typical day? What's the duty cycle? Where is it going? And make sure that whatever vehicle you put in that is a vehicle that could do that. And so you do kind of have to look at, most people are measuring something already, you know, how many kilometers does it go in a week, or who's driving it? Is it a lot of different drivers? Does it go all over, or just back and forth between offices, or whatever? So we look at all that stuff and figure out, like, oh, this vehicle could really be replaced by a plug-in hybrid, but this one should be a full EV, but it needs to be a large one, or, you know.
Yeah, and it is one of those things where organization or business really only needs to research that once, and rather than taking it right from scratch, it's a whole lot easier to talk to someone that's been through it.
Exactly. You can save a lot of time and money, because you're not the first to go through figuring all this out.
Yeah. Did another question pop up there?
I do actually have a question about that in the chat box.
Yeah.
So with regards to the Plug and Drive's EV incentives, are they exclusively for personal purchases, or can a business apply them to fleet purchases as well? And if so, is there a limit on the number of applications per business?
Yeah, we actually have it like right now 1 per person, because we wanted to make sure, like, to spread the love, but it can go to a business. There's no reason it couldn't go to a business, but there's no multiples.
Yeah.
Great. And there is one more question that just came up as well. Sure. There's concern that personal vehicle ownership can lead to increased levels of driving because the costs are already sunk, and worsen a variety of environmental and social problems. Can you speak to how EVs are being integrated into car sharing?
It's a great question. So when I started Plug and Drive, that was in 2010, 2011, so 10 years ago, we didn't even have like access to a vehicle or anything to show people. And the very first Leaf that I drove was actually in a car share, and there was a small car share in Toronto that had a couple of EVs. And within a few years, they stopped putting the EVs in the car share. And so what I learned from that experience, now it's changed a lot since then, it's much easier now, but it was very challenging to put EVs into a car share because people didn't understand how to use them properly. They hadn't kind of been trained ahead, like how far it could go and how to, you know, where to charge it and all the, you know, so, and typically people just go up and take the car. And so, and the other thing was the charging network was really small at that time. And so where were they going to charge it up? And they would just leave it somewhere dead, you know, so it was really, really tough. Mm-hmm. I'm happy to say you're starting to see them come back into car share. We're actually working with some folks to say, hey, put them in front of our center. We've got chargers there, and then we can help the person make sure they understand what they're getting into when they pick up the car. So there are solutions out there. Of course, a lot more charging out there, so it's easier for the driver to figure it out. And then the other exciting news, you probably heard both Uber and Lyft in the last couple of months said that they're going to try to include EVs in their ride sharing fleets. It's not clear how they're going to do that yet, but we are hoping we will try to help them show the owner driver, you know, who typically owns the car, why an EV would be a very affordable solution for them, and maybe encourage folks. They're going to provide a financial incentive, and we can provide some of the education. So it's certainly moving that way, and I agree with you. We don't want to encourage more car ownership. I certainly think if you are going to be a car owner, an EV is the way to go, but I would hate for people who are biking, walking, and taking transit to switch to a car. Certainly not the message we want to send.
And I don't think typically that's it. You know, I really do think this is about getting people who are driving traditional vehicles to switch over to these now much more affordable.
I like to think we want and, not or. You know,
that's right. Yeah, absolutely. And you know, I work a lot in the world of sustainable transportation, and I don't think people typically even do the math always on how much their car is costing them. So
they don't.
You know, so this idea that just because your electricity is less than your gas, people generally aren't making their transportation choices based on that little nugget.
No, because we're finding that when people go to the dealership, they're not even really digging into those, you know, fuel efficiency numbers. People don't tend to do math when they choose a car. So that's when they supersize it and all those things, because they don't realize how much more they're going to spend on gas. And also what we found is, like, in the early adopter crowd, there were a lot of engineers, and it was interesting because it's like they're into tech. Okay, so that's one reason, but the other reason was they were the ones that were doing math. And they were like calculating how much they would save. And so it was kind of interesting to see the kind of person that's choosing an EV.
Yeah. And I think that's interesting. And even within like the people who are with us today, like these are you folks are actually, you're here, you're making the effort to learn about EVs, which is much more than sort of the greater population is even at right now. But it really is the future. I mean, we know we have policies coming down the pipes. We know the city of Ottawa is moving toward a zero emission transportation future in a relatively short amount of time. So this is the direction the world is going in. This has already happened in Europe. We're a little behind some cities, but it's coming. So so it is really, it's really exciting to sort of be a little part of this, part of our transportation history, I think. But I'm a history dork, so that's a whole other conversation. Do you have another question there, Mandy?
I do have another question. Yes. How does cold weather affect EV range, and also how does it affect the efficiency and range of gasoline vehicles?
Right. So it does affect the efficiency of both gas cars and EVs. Those first generation cars, it affected them more than the latest versions. So, you know, if you had bought, like me, one of the first EVs that came out in 2011, you would have seen a drop in range on one of those coldest Ottawa days, like a -30 kind of day. You would see almost like a 50% drop in range, or 45%, something like that. And so you definitely would want to be looking at the range of the vehicle at its best and saying, okay, if it was half that, would it still be enough for me to get to work or wherever I go typically every day? Now I have to say the vehicle ranges do not drop as much, but they do still drop. Now the batteries are better insulated. There's like been lots of different management systems that have been put in place. So I would say, like, on the worst day, you might see a 30% drop. But remember, those worst days are not every day. And so again, just be smart about when you choose your vehicle and think, okay, like 99% of the time, I'm only going 30 kilometers a day. So don't make your decision based on like a once a year trip, you know, because what we hear from a lot of people is like, oh, well, once a year I go to Montreal, or once a year I drive, you know, to Algonquin, or whatever your thing is, to Maine or whatever. And people make their vehicle choice on this one trip instead of on the 99%, which is typically fine for an EV. So I say choose on the 99%, and then on that one trip you can rent a car, take a train, go with a friend, I don't know, do something else, and don't make that the car purchase all about that.
But people really do, which is how
They really do.
giant cars.
I hear it every day.
Yeah, and they're like, you need to fit in all the hockey gear you own.
Yeah. Well, I get is what am I going to do when I drive across Canada? And I'm like, are you going to drive across Canada? Because I know I never am, but I mean, you know,
and you probably even could now. I was looking at that
you
app.
could. It would be tough, but you could do it.
Yeah. But there is that app, right? I always
Yeah.
forget the name of it. That
Plug
shows
Share.
you all the charging.
PlugShare. So
Yeah.
you can go to PlugShare or Charge Hub and see that actually the infrastructure is pretty good. And then there's a new app called EV Trip Planner, which could help you, like if you just want to click a destination, like, oh, I want to drive to Nashville or whatever. Not right now, obviously. But, you know, and it'll kind of show you the best EV route. So there's lots of apps out there that help you.
Yeah. And we do have a great organization here in Ottawa. I just want folks to know about. It's called EVCO, which is the Electric Vehicle Council of Ottawa, I guess.
Yes.
And that's just a little community organization that was started in the 90s, I believe, by some keen EV enthusiasts. And those are just EV owners that they love sharing their wealth of information of EV ownership, especially in the Ottawa context. And they have monthly meetings and they have information, and that's evco.ca, I think.
Yeah. And by the way, those folks are the folks that we tap to work at our mobile EV education center, because they are great ambassadors for the EV community.
Yeah, they really are. Yeah. Any other questions there, Mandy?
No other questions.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Cara. It's been a real treat talking with you today. I'm sorry we didn't get to do our in-person EV
me too. Next time. Let's hope things improve.
Yes, well, they have to eventually, right?
Yeah.
So I guess we'll sign off and we'll wrap it up. And I do want to again thank you very much, and thanks to all our attendees who took the time to join us today. If you like this session, we have one more tomorrow. I believe it's NRCan tomorrow. Mandy's going to pipe in and tell me if that's the truth. I'm pretty sure it is, though.
It is NRCan.
Yeah, it's NRCan. Great.
Yes.
So you can learn what the federal government has coming down the pipes for EV infrastructure and incentives.
Yeah, they're doing plenty.
Yeah, and to stay up to date, I hope you'll sign up for our Enviro Center newsletter. It's called the Green Beat, and we will be posting a link in the chat for that. So thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.